Jake Morrison opened his eyes slowly. His head hurt badly, and his mouth felt dry. Everything around him looked strange and different. He was lying on cold ground that felt like glass under his hands. Where was he? The last thing he remembered was fighting on the mining planet with his team. They were soldiers for Earth, trying to protect human colonies from alien attacks. But something had gone wrong. Very wrong. Jake sat up and looked around. He was inside a huge cage made of some kind of clear crystal. The cage was so big he could barely see the other side. Outside the cage, he could see thousands of alien creatures sitting in tall seats like a giant stadium. They were all looking at him and making loud noises. The aliens looked like giant bugs with too many arms and legs. Their eyes were big and black, and they had sharp teeth that clicked when they talked. Some of them had colorful wings that made buzzing sounds. Others had hard shells that looked like armor. Jake stood up on shaky legs. He was wearing his regular work clothes, but all his weapons and equipment were gone. No gun, no knife, no radio to call for help. He was completely alone. Then he heard a sound that made his blood turn cold. It was a deep growling noise that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Jake turned around and saw 3 massive creatures walking toward him from different parts of the cage. They looked like the dragons from old Earth stories, but these were real and very much alive. Each one was as big as a truck, with thick scales that seemed to glow with their own light. Their claws were as long as Jake's arm, and when they opened their mouths, he could see rows of teeth like sharp knives, but the worst part was their eyes. These creatures were smart. Jake could see intelligence in their eyes, and that made them much more dangerous than any wild animal. One of the bug aliens started talking in a voice that hurt Jake's ears. Somehow, the words were translated into English by machines built into the cage walls. "Welcome, humans of Earth, to the greatest show in the galaxy," the alien said. "This creature before you claims to be from a species that dares to take our sacred worlds. Today, he will learn what happens to those who challenge the Zephyrian Empire." The crowd of aliens made excited noises and waved their arms. Jake realized they were betting on how long he would survive. "These are our most holy predators, the flame wraiths," the alien continued. "They have never been defeated. They have killed warriors from 100 different worlds. Today, they will add another species to their list of victories." Jake looked at the 3 dragon-like creatures again. They were moving closer, but they were not rushing toward him. They were being careful, studying him like he was studying them. The biggest dragon had golden marks on its scales and walked with confidence. It was clearly the leader. The other 2 were smaller, but still huge. They stayed back and let the big one move first. Jake had been a soldier for 20 years. He had fought in wars on 5 different planets and survived situations that killed most other men. But he had never faced anything like this. The golden dragon opened its mouth, and a stream of bright fire shot out. The fire was so hot that Jake could feel it from 30 feet away. It burned the black mark on the ground where it hit. The aliens in the crowd cheered louder. They wanted to see blood. But Jake did not run. Instead, he watched the dragons carefully. He noticed that after the big one breathed fire, it had to wait before it could do it again. He also saw that the other 2 dragons moved away when the leader used its fire breath. Had learned long ago that the key to surviving any fight was to understand your enemy. These creatures were powerful, but they were not perfect. They had weaknesses, and if he was smart enough, he could find them. The cage had different areas with rocks, trees, and old broken buildings. Jake started moving toward the rocky area, keeping his eyes on all 3 dragons. He did not run fast, because that would make him look like prey. Instead, he moved steadily and watched everything. The golden dragon followed him, but it did not attack right away. It was testing him, trying to understand what kind of creature he was. Jake picked up a small rock and threw it at one of the smaller dragons. The rock bounced off its scales and did no damage, but it got the dragon's attention. The dragon roared and started moving toward Jake. But when it moved, the golden dragon roared even louder and blocked its way. Jake realized something important. These dragons had rules about who could attack first. The leader wanted to fight Jake by itself. Jake smiled for the first time since waking up. Rules could be used. Rules could be broken. And rules could be turned against those who made them. The crowd of aliens was getting excited. They thought the show was about to begin. But Jake was not planning to give them the kind of show they expected. He was planning to survive. Jake spent the next hour watching the dragons instead of fighting them. This made the alien crowd very angry. They wanted to see blood and death, not a human walking around looking at things. The golden dragon followed Jake everywhere he went, but it did not attack. It seemed confused by Jake's behavior. Most creatures either ran away in fear or attacked right away. Jake was doing neither. Jake noticed many important things during his watching time. The golden dragon was definitely the boss, but it was also old. Its movements were slower than the other two, and it breathed harder after walking long distances. The two smaller dragons were younger and faster, but they were also less experienced. They made mistakes that the older dragon would never make. One of them got too close to the fake trees and got its claws stuck in the wood. The other one tried to breathe fire at Jake from too far away and just wasted its energy. Jake also learned about the cage itself. It was much bigger than he first thought, maybe 2 miles across. There were different areas like a forest section, a rocky mountain area, a swamp with real water, and a section with old ruins that looked like buildings from some ancient civilization. Most importantly, Jake figured out that the dragons had territories. The golden dragon stayed mostly in the ruins area. One smaller dragon controlled the forest section, and the other one lived in the Rocky Mountains. They only came together when there was prey. To hunt. Jake decided to test his theory. He walked toward the border between the forest and mountain areas. As soon as he crossed the invisible line, both smaller dragons came toward him, but they also started growling at each other. Jake quickly stepped back and watched what happened. The two dragons began fighting each other over who had the right to attack him. They bit and clawed at each other, while Jake stayed safely out of the way. The golden dragon roared from the ruins area, clearly angry that the other two were fighting instead of hunting. But it did not leave its territory to stop them. Jake smiled. These creatures were smart, but they were still controlled by their animal instincts. They had to follow rules about territory and pack leadership, even when those rules worked against them. The alien crowd was getting very upset. Some of them were screaming at the dragons to kill Jake. Others were shouting at the cage controllers to make something happen. The bug alien who had spoken before came back on the loudspeakers. "The human is being cowardly," it said. "We will make changes to force a proper battle." Suddenly, the cage began to change. The ground shook and moved. New walls appeared and old ones disappeared. The temperature dropped so quickly that Jake could see his breath in the air. Then it got very hot, so hot that sweat poured down Jake's face. Rain began falling from nowhere, followed by wind so strong it almost knocked him down. The aliens were using technology to make the cage harder to survive in. They wanted to force Jake to fight the dragons by making it impossible to hide or run away. But Jake had been trained for this. He had survived in deserts where the temperature reached 140 degrees. He had fought in jungles where it rained every day for months. He had lived through winter battles where soldiers froze to death in their sleep. Jake used the changing environment to his advantage. When the rain started, he collected water in pieces of broken stone. When the wind blew hard, He used it to carry his scent away from the dragons so they could not track him as easily. Most importantly, he began making tools. Jake found sharp pieces of metal in the ruins area and used rocks to make them sharper. He tied pieces of wood together with strips of cloth from his shirt to make a long spear. The dragons were having trouble with the changing environment too. The rain made their fire breath weaker. The strong wind made it hard for them to fly. The sudden temperature changes made them tired and confused. Jake realized something else important while watching them struggle. These dragons were not from this place either. They were prisoners just like him, brought here from their real home to fight and die for alien entertainment. He could see it in the way they looked around the cage with sad eyes. He could see it in how they moved carefully, like they were always looking for a way to escape. He could see it in how they did not really want to fight him, unless they had to. Jake made a decision that surprised even himself. Instead of using the dragon's confusion to attack them, he decided to help one of them. The smallest dragon had gotten trapped under a fallen tree during the windstorm. It was struggling to get free, but the tree was too heavy. The other dragons were too far away to help, and they might not help anyway because of their territorial rules. Jake could have left the dragon there to die, or even killed it while it was trapped. That would have made the fight easier for him later. Instead, Jake used his spear as a lever and helped lift the tree off the dragon's leg. The dragon looked at him with surprise and confusion. It had never seen a prey animal help a predator before. The dragon limped away without attacking Jake. It kept looking back at him as if trying to understand what had just happened. The alien crowd went completely silent. In all their years of watching arena fights, they had never seen anything like this. Jake looked up at the thousands of alien faces staring down at him. He raised his homemade spear above his head and shouted as loud as he could. "You want a show?" he yelled. "I'll give you a show you'll never forget." But it would not be the kind of show they expected. The dragon Jake had helped did not leave him alone after that. It followed him around the cage, but it did not try to attack. Jake decided to call it Ember because of the orange glow that came from its scales. At first, Jake was worried that Ember might be waiting for the right moment to kill him. But as hours passed, he began to understand that the dragon was actually trying to communicate with him. Ember would change the colors of its scales in different patterns. When Jake moved toward danger, Ember's scales would turn red. When Jake found something good like water or food, Ember's scales would turn blue. When Jake did something Ember liked, the scales would turn green. Jake started copying the color patterns. He could not change colors like Ember could, but he could use hand signals and body movements to respond. Soon, they had a simple way to talk to each other. Jake learned that Ember was not fully grown yet, which explained why it was smaller than the other two dragons. It was also hurt and lonely. The other dragons did not accept it because it was too young, and now they were even more angry because it had been helped by a human. Jake also discovered that Ember was much smarter than the aliens realized. It could solve problems, remember complex information, and even plan ahead. When Jake showed it how to use a stick to get fruit from high branches, Ember learned immediately and then improved the technique. More importantly, Ember began to trust Jake enough to show him things about the cage that Jake had missed. Ember led him to hidden water sources and safe places to sleep. It warned him when the cage's environment was about to change again. Working together, Jake and Ember became a team. When the golden dragon came hunting for them, Ember would distract it while Jake moved to a better position. When the other small dragon tried to corner Jake, Ember would make noise to scare it away. Jake taught Ember some of his military tactics. He showed it how to use the cage's terrain to create traps and ambushes. He taught it how to conserve energy during long fights, and how to make an enemy waste its strength. Ember was a fast learner. Soon, it was using Jake's techniques to outfight the other dragons, even though it was smaller and younger. The alien audience was divided about what they were seeing. Some of them thought it was fascinating to watch two different species work together. Others were angry and demanded that the cage controllers do something to stop it. Jake overheard the aliens talking about him through the translation systems. He learned that most species in the galaxy fought in predictable ways. They either used brute force, advanced technology, or special abilities like telepathy or energy manipulation. But humans were different. Humans adapted to any situation and found ways to survive that other species never thought of. They made alliances with their enemies, turned weaknesses into strengths, and refused to give up even when everything seemed hopeless. The aliens called this the human factor, and it scared them. They had built their empire by conquering species that fought in predictable ways. Humans were unpredictable, and that made them dangerous. Jake used this knowledge to his advantage. He started acting even more unpredictably than before. He would help his enemies when they expected him to attack. He would retreat when they thought he would advance. He would be gentle when they expected violence. This confused not only the dragons, but also the aliens watching. They could not figure out what Jake was planning, which made them nervous. Jake also made an important discovery in the ruins section of the cage. Hidden under some fallen stones, he found pieces of ancient technology. The technology was not like anything the bug aliens used. It was older and more advanced. When Jake touched the technology, it began to glow and respond to him. Ember's scales also began to glow when it came near the ancient devices. Jake realized that this technology was designed to work with multiple species, not just one. The ruins were not just decorations for the arena. They were the remains of a real civilization that had been destroyed long ago. The bug aliens had built their arena on top of a grave. Jake began to understand the history of this place. Long ago, different species had lived together in peace on this world. They had built amazing cities and shared their knowledge and technology. But then the Zephyrian Empire had come. They had destroyed the peaceful civilization and turned the ruins into entertainment for their people. The dragons were probably survivors from one of the destroyed worlds, captured and forced to fight for alien amusement. Jake felt angry about this discovery, but he also felt hope. If the ancient technology still worked, maybe he could use it to change the situation. He and Ember began exploring the ruins more carefully. They found hidden passages and secret rooms that the arena builders had missed. In one room, they discovered a collection of strange crystals that seemed to store information. When Jake touched one of the crystals, images appeared in his mind. He saw the world as it had been before the Zephyrian Empire destroyed it. He saw many different species living together, sharing knowledge, and building wonderful things. He also saw how the Empire had come with their warships and weapons. They had not just conquered the world, they had erased its history and culture. They had turned a place of learning and cooperation into a place of violence and death. Jake made a promise to himself and to Ember. He would not just survive this arena. He would find a way to honor the memory of the destroyed civilization and maybe even strike back at the Empire that had caused so much suffering. But first, he needed to deal with the other two dragons. The golden dragon was getting tired of waiting for Jake to fight properly. It was preparing for a final attack that would end the game one way or another. Jake looked at Ember, who was ready to fight beside him. Together, they would face whatever came next. The real battle was about to begin. Jake spent days learning how to use the ancient technology hidden in the ruins. The crystals contained information about the original builders of this world, and Jake discovered they had been master engineers who believed in cooperation between all species. The technology was amazing. It could control the cage's environment, communicate across vast distances, and even influence the behavior of electronic devices. Best of all, it responded to both human touch and dragon energy, proving that it was designed for multiple species to use together. Jake's first test was small. He used the ancient controls to turn off the artificial weather systems that had been making life miserable in the cage. Suddenly, the constant wind and rain stopped, and the temperature became comfortable. The alien audience noticed immediately. They began shouting at the cage controllers, demanding to know why the environmental challenges had stopped working. Jake's second test was bigger. He activated the ruins communication system and managed to tap into the arena's broadcasting network. Now he could hear everything the aliens were saying to each other, not just the translated announcements. What he learned made him angry, but also gave him hope. The aliens were arguing among themselves. Many species in the audience were uncomfortable with what they were seeing. They had been told that arena fights were battles between savage beasts, not intelligent beings cooperating with each other. Some aliens were questioning whether the dragons were really willing participants in these fights. Others were asking uncomfortable questions about where the dragons had come from and what had happened to their homeworld. Jake realized that the Zephyrian Empire's propaganda was starting to fail. The truth was more powerful than their lies, but only if enough people could see it. Jake decided to make his third test the biggest one yet. He activated the ancient broadcasting system and sent his own message across the entire arena network. "My name is Jake Morrison," he said, his voice reaching thousands of alien ears. "I am a human from Earth, and I want you to know the truth about this place." The arena fell silent. Even the dragons stopped moving and listened. "These creatures you call sacred predators are not your enemies," Jake continued. "They are prisoners, just like me. They were taken from their home and forced to fight for your entertainment." Jake gestured to Ember, who stood beside him with glowing scales. "This dragon saved my life today, and I saved its life yesterday. We are not natural enemies. We are friends who learn to work together." The alien crowd began making loud noises. Some were angry, others were confused, and a few seemed to be agreeing with Jake. "The ruins around us are not decorations," Jake went on. "They are the remains of a civilization that your empire destroyed. The ancient people who lived here believed in cooperation between species. They built technology that any intelligent being could use, regardless of what they looked like or where they came from." Jake activated more of the ancient systems. Suddenly, holographic images appeared throughout the arena, showing what the world had looked like before the Zephyrian Empire arrived. The images showed many different species living together in beautiful cities, sharing knowledge and technology. Then the images showed the Empire's ships arriving. They showed the destruction of the cities, the capture of survivors, and the building of the arena on top of the ruins. Many aliens in the audience were seeing this history for the first time. They had been told that the Empire brought civilization to savage worlds, not that it destroyed civilizations that were already advanced. The head controller, Hive Commander Zixtal, began screaming orders over the communication system. "Turn off those images. Stop the humans' broadcast. Release more predators into the arena." But Jake had learned how to use the ancient technology well. Every time the arena controllers tried to shut down his broadcast, he found a new way to keep it going. New creatures were released into the arena, but these were not natural predators. They were cyborgs, half-machine monsters that had been created specifically to kill anything that moved. They had metal claws, laser weapons built into their bodies, and computer brains that made them nearly impossible to outsmart. 6 of these mechanical monsters entered the cage, each one programmed to kill Jake and the dragons without mercy. But Jake was ready for them. He had spent his time well, learning not just how to use the ancient technology, but how to understand it. The original builders had faced similar threats long ago, and they had built defenses into their systems. Jake activated the ancient security protocols. Suddenly, the cyborg creatures stopped attacking and began shaking their heads as if trying to clear their thoughts. The ancient technology was designed to free intelligent minds from outside control. It was breaking the programming that forced the cyborgs to be killers. One by one, the mechanical creatures began to remember who they had been before they were turned into weapons. They had been people once, members of various species that the Empire had captured and modified. Instead of attacking Jake, they turned toward the arena walls where the controllers sat. They remembered their real enemies. The alien audience was now in complete chaos. Some species were demanding answers about how many of their people had been turned into arena monsters. Others were trying to leave the stadium before the freed. Cyborgs could reach them. But the most important change was happening among the dragons. Ember had been communicating with the other two, sharing what it had learned from Jake. The golden dragon approached Jake slowly, its scales showing colors that Jake now recognized as curiosity and hope rather than aggression. Jake held out his hand to the great dragon. After a moment of hesitation, the golden dragon touched Jake's hand with its claw. It was warm and surprisingly gentle. The third dragon joined them, and suddenly Jake found himself surrounded by three massive creatures that could have killed him easily, but chose instead to protect him. Hive Commander Zixtal made one final, desperate decision. If he could not control what was happening in the arena, he would destroy it completely. He activated the arena's self-destruct system. Alarms began blaring, and a countdown started. In 10 minutes, the entire arena would explode, killing everyone inside and destroying the evidence of what had happened. But Jake had one more surprise for the Empire. The ancient technology was not just about communication and environmental control. It was also about transportation. Jake activated the emergency evacuation system that the original builders had installed long ago. Teleportation portals began, opening throughout the arena, offering escape routes to anywhere in the galaxy. Choose your destinations carefully, Jake announced to everyone who could hear him. Some of you will want to go home. Others might want to visit the capital worlds of the Empire and share what you have learned here today. As the countdown continued, Jake faced a choice of his own. He could escape to safety, or he could do something that would change the galaxy forever. He chose to stay and fight. Jake stood in the center of the arena as chaos erupted around him. Thousands of aliens were fleeing through the teleportation portals he had opened, while others stayed to fight against the Empire's forces that were rushing into the stadium. 3 dragons stayed with Jake, ready to defend him against whatever came next. The freed cyborg creatures had also chosen to remain, using their mechanical weapons to fight the arena guards who were trying to stop the rebellion. Hive Commander Zixtal appeared on the communication screens throughout the arena. His insect face was twisted with rage and fear. "You have destroyed everything," he screamed at Jake. "Do you have any idea what you have done? The Empire will hunt you across the galaxy. They will destroy your entire species for this." Jake looked up at the screen calmly. "Your Empire was already trying to destroy my species," he said. "The only difference now is that we will not go quietly." The countdown timer showed 5 minutes remaining before the arena would explode. But Jake was not worried about the explosion anymore. He had learned enough about the ancient technology to stop it. More importantly, he had learned how to use the arena's communication network to broadcast across the entire Zephyrian Empire. His message was being heard on thousands of worlds, where millions of beings were learning the truth about their rulers. Jake activated the ancient systems one final time. Instead of just stopping the self-destruct sequence, he turned the arena into something it had never been before, a symbol of hope. Ancient builders had designed their technology to grow and adapt. Jake's modifications began spreading beyond the arena, reaching out through the Empire's own communication networks. Everywhere the signal reached, other hidden ruins began to wake up. Other ancient systems began to remember their original purpose. On distant worlds, enslaved populations began to receive broadcasts showing them what Jake had discovered. They learned about the civilization that had been destroyed to build the Empire. They learned that cooperation between species was not only possible, but had once been the foundation of a great society. Most importantly, they learned that the Empire could be defeated. The golden dragon, who Jake had started calling Blaze, suddenly roared and pointed toward the arena entrance. A new threat was approaching. The Empire's elite guard units, heavily armed soldiers wearing advanced battle armor. But Jake had one more surprise waiting. The freed cyborg creatures had been busy while he was working with the ancient technology. They had been freeing other creatures from the arena's holding cells, creatures that had been captured from dozens of worlds to serve as entertainment. Now an army of liberated beings faced the Empire's soldiers. There were flying creatures from gas giant worlds, massive armored beasts from high-gravity planets, swift hunters from forest worlds, and intelligent machines from civilizations that had been thought extinct. Jake realized that he was not just witnessing a rebellion anymore. He was seeing the birth of a new alliance, one that included every species the Empire had wronged. The battle was fierce but short. The Empire's soldiers were well-trained and well-equipped, but they were used to fighting predictable enemies. They had never faced such a diverse group of opponents working together with perfect coordination. Jake watched as a flying creature provided air support for a ground-based hunter, while a mechanical being repaired damage to organic allies in the middle of combat. It was exactly what the ancient builders had envisioned. Different species using their unique abilities to help each other instead of competing. When the last Imperial soldier surrendered, Jake found himself standing in an arena that had been transformed from a place of death into a symbol of rebirth. Hive Commander Zixtal made one final attempt to regain control. He appeared in person, surrounded by his personal guard and carrying advanced weapons. "This ends now, human," he said, pointing an energy weapon at Jake. "You have caused enough trouble." But before he could fire, something unexpected happened. Ember, the young dragon Jake had first befriended, stepped in front of Jake to protect him. Then Blaze moved to Jake's other side. The third dragon joined them, creating a protective barrier around Jake. The freed cyborgs formed a second ring of protection. Behind them came the other liberated creatures, each one ready to defend the human who had given them their freedom. Hive Commander Zixtal looked around at the hundreds of beings who were willing to die for Jake, and for the first time, fear showed in his alien eyes. "You cannot defeat the entire Empire," he said, but his voice was no longer confident. Jake stepped forward, gently moving past his protectors so he could face the alien commander directly. "You're right," Jake said. "I cannot defeat your entire, but I do not have to. You see, I am not trying to conquer anyone. I am just showing people that they have a choice." Jake gestured to the beings around him. "Every creature here chose to fight beside me instead of for you. They chose cooperation over domination, hope over fear, freedom over slavery." Jake's voice grew stronger as he continued. "You made one terrible mistake when you threw me in this cage. You thought you were putting a human in a cage with dragons. But you were really locking apex predators in a room together and giving us a common enemy." The ancient technology responded to Jake's words, amplifying his voice so it could be heard across the Empire's communication networks. On thousands of worlds, beings who had never heard of humans before were listening to Jake's message. "I am not your enemy because I am human," Jake said. "I am your enemy because you are a threat to every intelligent being in the galaxy. You destroy civilizations, enslave populations, and turn people into entertainment. That ends today." Jake raised his hand, and the ancient systems throughout the galaxy responded. On world after world, hidden ruins came to life. Ancient technologies began working again. Species that had been separated by the Empire's lies began communicating with each other. The rebellion that had started in one arena was spreading across the entire galaxy. Hive Commander Zixtal dropped his weapon and fell to his knees. He could see his empire crumbling around him, not through military conquest, but through the simple power of truth and cooperation. Jake looked down at the defeated alien commander with something that might have been pity. "You can surrender now and be treated fairly," Jake said. "Or you can keep fighting and face the judgment of every species you have wronged. Your choice." 6 months later, Jake stood on the bridge of a ship unlike any that had ever been built. Before, it was designed by humans, constructed by dragons, powered by ancient technology, and crewed by beings from 50 different worlds. The Zephyrian Empire had fallen, not through war, but through the simple realization that cooperation was stronger than domination. Some former imperial worlds had joined the new Galactic Alliance willingly. Others were still deciding what kind of future they wanted. Ember, now fully grown and wearing a translator device that allowed perfect communication with any species, served as Jake's first officer. Blaze commanded the ship's security forces, while the third dragon, who had chosen the name Storm, served as the chief engineer. Jake looked out at the stars and smiled. Somewhere out there, human colonies were no longer alone and under threat. They were part of something bigger now, something that the galaxy had not seen since the ancient builders had created their civilization of cooperation. The universe was vast and full of dangers, but it was also full of friends they had not met. Yet Jake Morrison had been thrown into a cage to die, but instead he had become something the galaxy desperately needed. Proof that different species could work together, that intelligence was stronger than force, and that the greatest predator in the universe was not the one with the biggest claws. It was the one who could convince others to fight alongside them instead of against them.